Picking up in Solomon Zeitlin's 1962, The Rise and Fall of the Judean State, a political and social and religious history of the Second Commonwealth. We pick up in Volume 1, Part 2, Judea as an independent state. 1. Jonathan as statesman. The turmoil in Syria gave Jonathan the opportunity of making Judea an independent state. The symbol of her subjugation to Syria was the citadel where the Syrian army contingent was stationed. Jonathan mustered his army and attacked the citadel. Not all the people approved of his policy. Since Demetrius II did not interfere with their religion, some Judeans preferred that Judea should remain part of the Syrian Empire. They were opposed to the establishment of an independent state under the leadership of the Hasmoneans, who were not of the high priestly or Davidic families. A delegation of these Judeans went to see King Demetrius II to inform him of Jonathan's designs. The author of 1 Maccabees calls these Judeans men who hated their nation. The first time this epithet was used. Previous authors had termed such people lawless men and sinners. Josephus is more specific, indicating that the men who went to Demetrius had fled from the citadel. When Demetrius learned of Jonathan's attack, he went to Ptolemaeus and called on Jonathan to abandon the siege of the citadel. He further commanded him to come to Ptolemaeus for a conference. Jonathan refused to lift the siege. He did, however, go to Ptolemaeus, taking with him a number of elders and priests. He also carried along a sizable amount of gold, with which he hoped to mollify Demetrius's anger. The strategy was successful. Instead of punishing Jonathan for his ambition and arrogance, King Demetrius conferred upon him the title Friend of the King. This turn of events reveals both Jonathan's skill in diplomacy and Demetrius's sense of insecurity on his throne. He was unable to restore order to his troubled kingdom. His Cretan army regarded his Syrian Greek troops with contempt and so brought about their eventual disloyalty to the king. Recognizing this, Jonathan requested Demetrius to free Judea and the 3 provinces which were annexed from Syria by his father, King Demetrius I. In return, Jonathan promised the king 300 talents. Demetrius granted the concessions, while Jonathan agreed to permit the Syrian army to remain in the citadel. Shortly thereafter, when Demetrius saw that the country was quiet and that there was no one to resist him, he formally ascended the throne. He dismissed the Cretan army, which he had brought with him when he came to Antioch. The Syrian Greek army, which was not friendly to him, then revolted, and Demetrius was compelled to appeal to Jonathan for help to protect his throne. Jonathan sent 3,000 men to help him restore order in Antioch, and in return asked him to discharge the garrisons stationed in the citadel as well as in the other strongholds. Demetrius promised to comply with this request, but at the proper time. Although Antioch was subdued with the help of the Judean army, the position of Demetrius was still not secure. The Antiochians were resentful that he had brought in the Judean army. In order to quiet them, Demetrius made a show of hostility toward Jonathan, even threatening war. This period of tension was utilized by Diodotus, who had been a military leader in the army of Alexander Balis. He took the son of Alexander Balis from the Arab sheikh to whom he had been entrusted and declared the boy, Antiochus, king and rightful successor to his father Alexander. Diodotus himself assumed the name of Trypho when Trypho and the boy, Antiochus VI, made war against Demetrius. The Syrian army joined Trypho, and Demetrius fled to Seleucia. The kingdom was divided. Trypho and the boy, Antiochus sixth, occupied Antioch, while Demetrius II made his headquarters in Seleucia. Jonathan now saw a fruitful opportunity for improving his position in Judea. Trypho, quickly recognizing the advantage of having Jonathan as an ally, sent a letter to him confirming all the privileges which had been granted him by Alexander Balis as well as Demetrius. He also declared Jonathan to be one of the king's friends. Trypho further confirmed the annexation of the districts which had been added to Judea: Apharima, Lydda, Ramathaim, and probably Ekron, and appointed Simon governor of most of Coel Syria, from the ladder of Tyre to the border of Egypt. Jonathan knew the weakness of Demetrius's position and the instability of his character. Moreover, the appointment of Simon as governor of the greater part of Coel Syria would provide him with many opportunities to consummate his ambitions, to free Judea, enlarge her territory, and particularly to add those cities which would give her an outlet to the Mediterranean. Jonathan therefore joined Trypho and Antiochus VI and became their ally. Marshalling his army and those Syrians who had transferred their allegiance to Antiochus, Jonathan marched to the city of Ascalon, situated on the coast about 12 miles north of Gaza, and the people peacefully welcomed him. He then marched to Gaza, but here the people closed their gates. He laid siege to Gaza, and after destroying the suburbs of the city by fire, compelled the inhabitants to sue for peace. In order to make the peace secure, Jonathan took hostages and sent them to Jerusalem, following the Roman custom. He had thus subdued the cities of the Mediterranean coast in the name of the boy king Antiochus. At the same time, he was undoubtedly also seeking to strengthen his own position in Judea. Word now came that one of Demetrius's generals was massing an army in the northern part of Galilee near the city of Kadesh. Jonathan decided to proceed there with an army to prevent the Syrians from invading Judea. He encamped in the valley of Hazar by the waters of Lake Gennesaret, modern Lake Tiberias. In the battle which took place between the two armies at Hazar, Jonathan seemed to suffer defeat, but finally, through the exceptional heroism of a few soldiers, won a great victory. Simon had, in the south of Judea, where the garrison was loyal to Demetrius, the fortress surrendered after a long siege, and Simon stationed his own men there. While Jonathan strove to establish his military position in Judea, he also took steps to strengthen his position diplomatically. He sent an embassy to Rome to confirm and renew the treaty of friendship between them. He was undoubtedly aware that Rome would not extend material aid to him in his struggle against the Seleucids, but the friendship of the Roman Senate was very important to him, as it would increase his prestige with his people at home and with the Syrians. He also sent an embassy of friendship to the Spartans. After Demetrius's men were defeated in the valley of Hazar, the failing king dispatched another army against Jonathan. It encamped near the city of Hamet, which was later incorporated into the city of Tiberias. The locale was once again in the vicinity of Lake Gennesaret, and once again, to prevent an invasion of Judea, Jonathan marched to meet them. This time the Syrians retreated without offering battle. Jonathan pursued them as far north as Damascus. He then turned his forces against the Judean Arabs, who were allies of Demetrius, and whose country lies northwest of Damascus. While Jonathan was fighting the Syrians in the north, Simon captured Ascalon and took Jaffa, a very important port on the Mediterranean. He also fortified the city of Adida, which lies about 4 miles east of Lydda and northwest of Jerusalem. It was situated on a hill above the plains of Judea and was of great strategic value. When Jonathan returned to Jerusalem after his victory in the north, he called an assembly of the elders to discuss the defense of Judea. They decided to build a number of fortifications in Judea and to raise the walls of Jerusalem to protect it from assault. They also decided to build a wall between the citadel and the city, which would isolate its garrison of Assyrians and Hellenistic Judeans, prevent them from having any intercourse with the city, and might eventually starve them out. All this was done ostensibly in the interest of the young king Antiochus and his regent Trypho. But the latter became aware that Jonathan's power was growing in Judea, and that while he was contesting Demetrius for the crown of the Seleucids, he was losing Judea. Trypho then determined that for his own best interest he must destroy Jonathan. He almost certainly intended to make himself king and to do away with the boy Antiochus. But he was not yet ready to fight an open battle with Jonathan, and so sought to take him by guile. He took a small army and went to the city of Scythopolis, where he was met by Jonathan with an army of 40,000 men. Trypho, to remove any suspicion from Jonathan's mind, bestowed many honors upon him and insisted that his strong army was superfluous, since they were friends. He advised Jonathan to disperse his forces and send the men home, and he offered to accompany him to Ptolemais. Although Ptolemais was outside the borders of Judea, it had been given to Jonathan by Demetrius the first. Trypho promised to recognize Jonathan as the official owner of the city of Ptolemais, and also to present to him the entire coast from Ptolemais to Jaffa. The offer was irresistible. Jonathan had accomplished much by diplomacy, but he must be termed naive in accepting the deceptive words of Trypho. He dismissed his army, retaining only a small troop, and accompanied Trypho to Ptolemais. When Jonathan and his retinue entered the city, they were arrested. The soldiers were slain, and he was made prisoner. Trypho sent his troops to overtake the dispersed groups of Jonathan's army, but they had reached Jerusalem safely, and informed the people that Jonathan had been killed. This was not yet the case, but the Judeans believed it, and it was a tragic blow to their hopes. They thought that with the death of Jonathan, all the victories he had won would come to naught. They felt that they had again lost a great leader, a loss as irreparable as the death of Judah Maccabee. Now, of the 5 sons of Mattathias, only Simon was left. It was natural that he should become the head of the people. By popular consent, he was chosen to succeed his brother Jonathan. – 2. Simon. Simon's first act was to occupy Jaffa. He had previously placed a garrison in the city. Fearing that the inhabitants of the city would assist Trypho, Simon sent a general, Jonathan the son of Absalom, with an army to seize the city and expel the inhabitants. Trypho left Ptolemais with an army to invade Judea, carrying Jonathan with him as a hostage. Simon, however, went out to meet Trypho and encamped in Idida, about 4 miles northeast of Lydda. Trypho received word that Simon had succeeded Jonathan and had raised an army to oppose him, sent word to Simon that he bore no malice either toward him or his brother Jonathan. He explained that he held Jonathan as a hostage only because Jonathan had not made payment to the royal treasury for the office he was occupying. He said that if Simon would send him 100 talents of silver and 2 of Jonathan's sons as hostages, he would free Jonathan. Simon knew this was an act of treachery. In order not to be accused of having brought about Jonathan's death, he forwarded the money and sent along his 2 nephews, the sons of Jonathan. The demands were met, but Jonathan was not freed. Trypho saw the strong position of Simon's army in Idida, and, rather than attack, decided to march on Jerusalem. He did so through the lowlands to the south. Simon followed him to the hilly country and occupied a position between the Syrian army and Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the garrison, which was still in the citadel, dispatched envoys to Trypho, begging him to send provisions and to come to their rescue. The wall built by Jonathan between the citadel and the city had proved effective and had kept the garrison from entering the city. Trypho, with his cavalry, hastened to Jerusalem to relieve them. That night there was a heavy snowfall, which is unusual south of Jerusalem, but still does occur. The roads became hazardous, especially for the cavalry. Trypho had to give up his march against the city and turn to the south, proceeding to the extreme end of the Dead Sea, and thence east of the Jordan to Gilead. There he had Jonathan executed and returned to Syria. Simon buried his brother Jonathan beside his parents and his 4 brothers in the city of Modin. Later he built them a common sepulchre and set up 7 pyramids in memory of his parents and 4 brothers, reserving one for himself. Jonathan died either at the end of 144 or in the beginning of 143. About 18 years after his brother Judah had fallen in battle. Under Jonathan's leadership, Judea had taken great strides in the march toward freedom. At the time of Judah Maccabee's death, there was hardly an army to speak of. There were guerrilla fighters and fanatics who were ready to sacrifice their lives for their beliefs. Jonathan succeeded in forming a regular army, but he was more than a great organizer. He was a fine statesman. He knew how to use the weaknesses of the Seleucid Empire to the advantage of Judea. He took sides in the Syrian civil wars in such a way as to improve Judea's position and his own as its leader. The high priests were still appointed by the Syrian government after Judah's death. First, Alcimus, and later, Jonathan. After Jonathan's death, Simon became high priest at the behest of the Judeans alone. They did not ask for confirmation of his appointment from the Syrian government, although Judea was not yet so declared. It was already de facto a free state, and Simon exercised his authority as an independent ruler. He now sought to declare Judea officially and formally an independent state. A reversal of tactics seemed to offer the best chance to do so. Jonathan had been an ally of Trypho and the young Antiochus, and had helped them in their struggle against Demetrius II. Simon, however, turned to Demetrius, who needed allies and help, especially money, for his mercenaries. He sent an embassy with presents to Demetrius and asked him to recognize Judea as an independent country. Demetrius was more than willing to accept the friendly gesture. He sent Simon, as high priest, an official letter and declared to the people of Judea that he released them from their paying all future taxes to the Seleucids. This was tantamount to recognizing Judea as a sovereign state de facto et de jure. Thus Simon achieved a great diplomatic victory. The Megillat Tanit states that it was on the 27th day of Iyar 143 that the tribute from Judea and Jerusalem to the Seleucid Empire was discontinued. The day was declared a semi-holiday on which the people were forbidden to mourn. Simon at once moved to take the city of Gezer, which was very important because it commanded the passes of the mountains which lie northwest of Nicopolis, Emmaus. Holding it would enable him to maintain communication between Jerusalem and Jaffa. After a successful siege of the fortress of Gezer, Simon expelled the heathens and settled it with loyal Judeans. He then invested the citadel of Jerusalem and starved its garrison into submission. On the 23rd day of Iyar, in the spring of 142, Simon's men entered the citadel, singing hymns to God and bearing palm branches as a sign of victory. The capture of the citadel was considered a great victory, and this day was also declared a semi-holiday. The Judeans looked upon the citadel as a symbol of their humiliation and suffering, and its capture by Simon was considered a double victory, the removal of the last vestige of subjection and the triumph of Judaism over Hellenism. Simon and the independence of Judea. Political conditions in Syria continued to help Simon extend his power in Judea. Demetrius had learned of the revolt of the eastern peoples against their Parthian rulers. The Parthians now ruled over Babylonia. Being assured of no disturbance in the southern region, since he had gained the friendship of Simon, he thought it the propitious time to wrest back the upper lands from the Parthians. In the years 142 to 141, Demetrius mustered an army and marched into Medea to re-establish Seleucid sovereignty there. The earlier part of the expedition was successful. Later, when he continued to press forward, the Parthians retreated to the Iranian plateau, where he was defeated and taken prisoner by Mithridates I. He was treated kindly by King Mithridates, who even gave him his sister, Rhodogone, in marriage. Trypho, upon learning that Demetrius II had been taken captive by the Parthians, killed young King Antiochus VI, or, according to others, ordered him to be killed, and assumed the title of king. This left Trypho, for a time, the sole king of Syria. Cleopatra, the wife of Demetrius II, was with her children in Seleucia. Fearing that she and her children would be killed by Trypho, he sent word to Antiochus, nicknamed Sidetes, the brother of her husband, Demetrius II, who was in Rhodes, and urged him to come to Syria and declare himself king. This he quickly did, calling himself King Antiochus VII. Despite the fact that her husband, Demetrius II, was alive, though in captivity, Cleopatra married Antiochus in order to strengthen his position in the war against Trypho. This was her third marriage. She had first been given by her father Ptolemy to Alexander Balas, whom she recognized as the legitimate son of Antiochus Epiphanes. She bore him a son, Antiochus, who was subsequently murdered by Trypho. When her father, Ptolemy, renounced Alexander Balas, he gave her in marriage to Demetrius II. The latter's brother was her third royal spouse. Once again, there were rival kings in Syria, Antiochus the seventh, Sidetes, and Trypho. Antiochus, in his struggle for the throne and in preparation for the coming war with Trypho, sought to assure himself of the friendship of Simon. Before he reached the shores of Syria, he wrote a letter to Simon, whom he addressed as high priest and ruler of the Judeans. In the letter he referred to the usurpers who had gained mastery over the kingdom of his father Demetrius I, and stated that he was now ready to land in Syria, with an army to reestablish the kingdom of his fathers. He promised to release the Judeans from all debts owed to the king. He further promised Simon that he would greatly exalt him and honor the Judeans and the temple. He even assured Simon of the right of coinage. The privileges which Antiochus subsequently bestowed upon Simon were of no great political consequence. The episode merely emphasizes the fact that Judea under Simon already possesses full sovereignty. Judea had been a free state since 144 to 143. It had been recognized as such by Antiochus's brother, Demetrius II, before he organized the expedition against the Parthians from 144 to 143, until 140 to 139, when Antiochus VII invaded Syria with an army to fight Trypho. Its independence had only grown. In these 4 years, Simon had succeeded in reinforcing the borders of Judea and had enabled the people to live in peace. The author of 1 Maccabees glorified both Simon's domestic and military achievements. The quote, "He broadened the borders of his nation and ruled over the land. He gathered many captives and reigned over Gazara, Betzur, and the citadel. From it he took its uncleanliness, and none was there to oppose him. They tilled their land in peace. The land yielded its increase, and the trees in the plains their fruit. Old men sat in the streets, all of them talking about the good times, while youth donned the glory and apparel of war. He provided food for the cities, and furnished them with means for defense, until his fame was proclaimed to the ends of the earth. He made peace in the land, and Israel rejoiced exceedingly. Everyone sat under his own vine and fig tree, with no one to make them afraid. No one was left in the land to fight them, and the kings were destroyed in those days. He strengthened all the lowly of his people. He sought out the law, and every lawless and wicked man he removed. He glorified the sanctuary and multiplied the vessels of the sanctuary." There is undoubtedly some exaggeration in these words, yet they have great historical significance. They indicate not only the accomplishments of Simon, but the esteem in which the Judeans held him. This internal strength was reinforced by Roman support of Judean independence. It will be called that already in the year 143 BCE, Jonathan had sent an embassy under the leadership of Numenius, son of Antiochus, to renew the treaty into which Judah Maccabee had entered with the Romans. On its return journey, the embassy was expected also to visit Sparta. It was well received by the Roman Senate, and a new treaty of friendship concluded. While the embassy was still in Rome, word came of the assassination of Jonathan. This news caused great grief, both there and in Sparta. When the Roman Senate learned that Simon had succeeded his brother Jonathan, they sent condolences and expressed a desire to renew the treaties of friendship which had been made previously with Judah Maccabee and Jonathan. Similarly, the rulers of the city of Sparta wrote to Simon of the joy of his accession as ruler of the Judeans. In the year 141, Simon dispatched another embassy to Rome to confirm the alliance. This group, again led by Numenius, carried with it as a gift a gold shield weighing 1,000 minas. Before discussing the effect of this act, it is important that another sign of Judean independence be treated in some detail. It will be recalled that the high priesthood of Simon, as well as of his brother Jonathan, had been conferred upon them by the Syrian kings. It is true that the Judeans then confirmed these appointments, but they were nonetheless legally dubious. According to the Pentateuch, the high priesthood was given to Phinehas, progenitor of the Zadokite family. The high priesthood had been held by this family for centuries, the office being hereditary. Moreover, from the time of the Restoration almost to the time of the outbreak of the revolt against Syria, the secular leadership had also been held by this family. Simon held both offices by virtue of his great victory over the Syrians and because of his establishment of the independence of Judea. Still, he was not of the Zadokite family. Clearly, something needed to be done, and the action taken is a further indication of the strength of Judean independence. Simon's election by the Knesset Haggadah. On the 18th day of Elul, 141, a Knesset Haggadah, a great synagogue, consisted of priests, leaders, and elders of the people, was summoned by Simon to legalize his holding of both offices. This great assembly conferred both offices upon him and his family forever. The resolution adopted by the Knesset Haggadah stated the reasons for bestowing these honors upon Simon. It noted that his brothers, priests of the family of Jorib, had given their lives for the sanctuary and the people, that he, the only one left, had succeeded his brother Jonathan as high priest, and the resolution especially singled out for praise the capture of Bet-Zur, Gaza, and Jaffa, and the citadel in the city of David. It also stated that King Demetrius had confirmed Simon as the high priest because he had heard that the Romans had treated the Judeans as friends and had received Simon's ambassador with great honor. But other sources indicate that Demetrius had in fact confirmed the high priesthood before Simon had sent his delegation to Rome. The text of the resolution continues. The quote, "It should not be possible for any of the people or of the priests to set any of these things at naught, nor to countermand whatever he," Simon in brackets, "should order, nor to convoke an assembly in the country without his permission, nor to don purple, nor to wear garments fastened with a gold clasp." End of quote. It also declared that all the people should serve Simon as the high priest, and that he was to be the general and the governor of the Judeans and of the priests. A clause was inserted that he should continue as high priest and governor until a true prophet should arise in Israel. This was done to meet the problem of his lineage. By acknowledging the problem but postponing its official solution to the day when prophecy would return, the office could legally and officially be given to Simon and his descendants for the time being. Simon's title was not only high priest, but also Ser Amel, Prince of the people of God. This resolution was inscribed on copper tablets and placed in the archives of the temple. The Knesset Haggadah bestowed the high priesthood upon Simon's descendants in the 3rd year of his service as high priest. King Demetrius had appointed him high priest in 143, the 18th of Elul, on the year 141 BCE, was therefore counted as his 3rd year of priesthood and governorship, since the years of the high priesthood as well as the king were counted from Nisan. This act of the General Assembly was revolutionary. Previously, the high priest had not only exercised governorship, but by virtue of his ecclesiastical authority had also had the privilege of interpreting the religious law. Thus he was the spiritual leader of all the Judeans who lived anywhere, whether under Seleucid or Ptolemaic sovereignty. Now this privilege of legal interpretation was taken from Simon and his descendants. As high priest and chief religious officer, his sole authority was now limited to the temple. As governor of Judea, he had authority only over those Judeans who lived in Judea. A new institution was established for the interpretation and the execution of the religious laws. It was a court, a Beit Din, which later became known as the Sanhedrin. Its authority extended to the entire body of Judeans the world over. Thus, the new state of Judea had the high priest, who was the head of the temple, the governor, who was the political leader of the state of Judea and managed its foreign affairs, and the Beit Din, the supreme court, which had religious authority over all the Judeans. The renewed Syrian effort. Shortly after this extraordinary event, the embassy headed by Numenius returned from Rome with a letter signed by Lucius, consul of the Romans, addressed to King Ptolemy VII, Physcon. The letter notified him that Rome had accepted the Judean embassy and had made a treaty of friendship with the Judeans. It instructed King Ptolemy not to make war on them or to make alliances with those who fought against them, and not to give asylum to any rebels who opposed Simon and still adhered to the old Hellenistic party of Jason, Menelaus, and Alcimus. It demanded that rebels who fled to Ptolemy's domain be extradited to Judea to be punished in accordance with the laws of that country. A copy of this letter was also sent to many small states, Sparta, Rhodes, Cyprus, and Cyrene, who were not as yet satellites of Rome, although she already exerted great influence over the entire Mediterranean area. A copy was also sent to King Demetrius II, still a captive in Persia, but not to either Antiochus VII or his rival Trypho, neither of whom was recognized by Rome. Once again, the motive was Rome's policy to divide and rule. Her real reason for hastening to recognize Judea as a free state was to weaken the Seleucids. The goal of her foreign policy was ultimately to possess the entire area of the Mediterranean coast. Less than a century later, the great-grandson of Simon the high priest was first put in chains by the Romans, and then later put to death, it being no longer in Rome's interest to have Judea a free, independent state. Clearly, the recognition of Judea as an independent state in the time of Simon was given with the purpose of absorbing her later. The Roman historian Judaen, who was unfriendly to the Judeans and not familiar with their history, he erroneously stated that Moses was the son of Joseph and a former ruler of Egypt, said that the Judeans were the first people of the East to regain their freedom through Rome, and that she bestowed upon them, not unwillingly, a gift she had no right to make. In this the historian may be right. In the year 140 to 139, Antiochus had almost the entire country with him, as most of the army under Trypho deserted him and joined Antiochus. Trypho was routed and fled to Dor by the sea, modern Tentura, about 9 miles north of Caesarea. Antiochus besieged the city by land and sea, but Trypho escaped and fled to the city of Orthosia, a few miles north of Tripolis. Not sure of his safety, Trypho later fled to Apamea, where he was captured and put to death. While Antiochus besieged the city of Dor, Simon sent 2,000 men with equipment to help him. Antiochus refused this help, since he was already certain of victory, and as there were now no other serious contenders for the throne, he did not need Simon as an ally. Rather, he sent a general named Athenobius to Simon and demanded the return of Jaffa, Gazara, and the citadel in Jerusalem, which he said belonged to his kingdom, as well as 500 talents in indemnity. Simon replied that he had never conquered any foreign land, and that these cities always belonged to the Judeans. He said, however, in an effort to bargain, that he was willing to give the king 100 talents in restitution for the damage he had done to the heathen inhabitants when they had been exiled from the cities. Antiochus insisted upon the 500 talents and the cities, but Simon rejected his demand, holding that the cities always had been Judean. This reply did not satisfy Antiochus, and he sent General Candabeus with an army to make war on Simon. Antiochus's army encamped in Jabna, whence they made incursions into Judea. As Simon was too old to assume command in the field, he entrusted the campaign to his sons Judah and John. They assembled an army of 20,000 infantry and cavalry and marched against Candabeus, establishing their headquarters in the city of Modin, where their grandfather had first raised the flag of revolt. Not being sure that the unseasoned Judean cavalry could match the well-disciplined cavalry of their enemy, Judah and John placed the cavalry in the middle and the infantry on both flanks to protect it. The two armies faced each other across a brook called the Shurak. At first the Judean army hesitated to cross, but John set his men an example by crossing first. The army followed, and a bitter battle ensued. Judah was wounded severely, but John pursued the enemy to Kedron and down into the plains of Ashdod. He returned to Jerusalem as a conqueror. After this victory, there was a brief period of peace in Judea. The reply picking up. Simon had a son-in-law named Ptolemy, who was governor of the plains of Jericho. This area was one of the most important in Judea. The land was fertile, and the strategic importance since it controlled the fords of the Jordan. Yet this significant post did not satisfy Ptolemy. He may have been ambitious to rule all of Judea, or he may have been encouraged by the party which had ruled the Judeans before the Hasmoneans to be hostile to them, or he may have become a hireling of Antiochus the Seventh. This latter possibility is supported by the fact that after his treachery, he sent a letter to Antiochus asking that an army be sent to him so as to enable him to annex the country to Syria. Perhaps what Antiochus could not do by force of arms because of John's victory, he tried to do by conspiracy with Ptolemy. Possibly all three motives prevailed, for he made plans to wipe out Simon's entire family and thus end the Hasmonean rule. In the months of Shebat 136, when Simon was making the rounds of the country, he visited Jericho with his wife and 2 sons, Judah and Mattathias. John was not with them, having remained in Gazara. where he was in command. Ptolemy gave his guests a hospitable reception and escorted them to the fortress of Doc, which he had built. He feted them, and during a banquet had Simon and his 2 sons slain. To make sure that there would be no opposition and that he would be able to assume complete leadership over the Judeans, he sent men to Gazara to do away with John. John, however, had learned about the death of his father at the fortress and was ready for Ptolemy's men. Upon their arrival, John had them arrested and ordered them executed. He then rushed away to Jerusalem, where he was welcomed. His arrival forestalled Ptolemy's attempt to seize the capital and dominate the country. End of 2:2.